Hi, this is a short presentation aimed at people doing AS computing as revision of some of the basics of procedural programs. Procedural programming languages use English-like statements as opposed to declarative programming languages, which rely on facts and rules. It is important to have a good understanding of procedural programming languages, as this is used in the pseudocode which is encountered in exams. Probably the best place to start is to go over some of the basic definitions. Something you'll encounter all the time in code are statements, which is one instruction that can be executed. An example of this is a line of code, such as A equals B plus 5. Another definition you may need to know is an identifier. This is a formal name given to a variable or a constant. Just to go over that, the difference between a variable and a constant is that, while a variable changes during the course of a program being executed, a constant remains the same. A good example of where you might want to use a constant is in a program with a physics engine. You may wish to declare the value of gravity as a constant for use in later calculations. In this situation, if you ever want to change the value of gravity, for whatever reason, you don't have to change it in multiple calculations throughout the code, but just where it is declared as a constant. It saves time. There are three programming constructs you need to be aware of and understand how they are used. The first one is selection, and this is where a condition is used to decide which statements to execute. Basically, this means some sort of logical decision is made. For example, is A greater than 0? And if it is, then a certain part of the code is executed. And if it is not true, then another part of the code may be executed. Or in some situations, no code. There are two types of selection, if and case statements. These can be nested, which means one selection appears within another. The next one is a sequence. This is quite simple, just one instruction following another, in the order that they appear in the code. So an example of this might be A equals A plus 1, followed by B equals C minus A. The next one is iteration, which I'll cover in a bit more detail. Iteration is basically a loop of some sort. In general, it is a group of instructions repeated a set amount of times, or until a condition is met. Like selections, loops can also be nested, one loop appearing within another. There are three types of loops, all of which are used in different situations. The for next loop is used when the programmer knows how many times he wants something to loop, and he can set it to loop exactly this many times. You can see the example there, and this will run for the numbers 1, 2, 3, up until 10, so it is looping 10 times. When num is 1, then print num will print 1, because it's incrementing each time. By the end it will have printed all the numbers from 1 to 10. The repeat until loop is used when the programmer wants to check a condition at the end of the loop, but ensure that the loop is entered at least once. The example there will essentially do the same thing as the previous loop, however the way it goes about it is different. Instead of running for a certain amount of times, it checks at the end to see if num is greater than or equal to 10, and if it is, then the loop stops. Unlike a for next statement, where the number is incremented on next, to do the same thing with a repeat until, there must be a statement, num equals num plus 1, to increment the number. In reality, a repeat until loop wouldn't be used for the example shown, because a for next loop would be easier. A while end while loop is similar to a repeat until loop, except that the condition is checked at the start of the loop, instead of at the end. As it is checked at the start, in some situations the loop may not be entered at all, unlike a repeat until loop where it is always entered at least once. The example this time will still print the numbers 1 to 10, as although it checks it is less than 10 at the start, if it is 9 at the start, then the loop will be run, and 1 will be added to 9, making 10, and then it is printed. Again, this loop wouldn't really be used for this. And here is an example of the sort of question you might get in an exam. State the three different types of repetition, loop, construct. In each case, state how its use differs from the other two. For this question, there is a total of 6 marks, 2 for each type. As it says state, just short words and phrases are okay for the marks, and no detailed explanation or description is needed. For the first 3 marks, it wants the names of the loops, so this is just writing for next, repeat until, while end while, like shown above. For the next 3 marks, it expects a short statement of how it is used. Again, this is just learning something, and does not require you to apply it to a given situation. This is quite a basic question for 6 marks. However, it's the sort of question that will be on the exam, and you need to learn the stuff to be able to get the marks. Part B of this question is a good example of one that requires you to apply knowledge of procedural programs. It requires you to understand what a program written in pseudocode is doing, and the output it will produce. In this example, it is finding the result of dividing A by B, which is given as C. However, if B is equal to 0, then it makes C the same as A. Going through it line by line, it is easy to see what is happening, and the format is logical, but it does require a basic understanding of pseudocode. What does the question mean by the outputs? Basically, these are all the numbers that are printed. It is easy to forget to write A and B down as outputs, because it is stated in the question, but you must be careful to do this. So for the first part, 8 is output, 2 is output, and the result of dividing 8 by 2, 4 is also output. The second part is asking what happens if the selection, the if statement, is true. In this case, 6 and 0 are output, then 6 is output again, because C is the same value of A, as B equals 0. There are other things you need to know about procedural programs, such as recursion, but these are more difficult topics and should be covered separately. So that's all for this video.